Peace. What's up, everybody? Sebastian Seb is Hip Hop from RapRehab.com here with the woman of the hour, of the month, of the year, none other than Rhapsody. Peace, Rhapsody. Peace.
What's up, bro?
I'm good. It's an honor. You know what's dope about doing this is that, I get to build and interview people that I actually listen to. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody is saying, hey, you got to go and interview this person or that person. Here's the album, review it, get familiar with it. No, this is, nobody's asking me to do anything. This is me, building with the people that I look up to, people that I admire. So this is dope for me. This is real dope.
Man, it's dope for me too, because all your articles you send me, I read every one of them, and I'm a fan of you.
Well, I appreciate that.
When you reached out, I was like, oh yeah, that's nothing.
Word up, that's dope.
Real pleasure to have him on the program, joining us live from Southern California. Our guest, Sebastian Elkouby. Mr. Elkouby, are you with us, sir?
Yes, sir. Peace. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Glad to have you. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Are you on speakerphone?
No. I have my headset on.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm still getting an echo. Let's see.
Hold on. Let me see if I can take the headset off and is this better?
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. I'm not hearing the echo now. We should be good.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make a couple of clarifications that I heard in the intro. The site that I write for is raprehab.com. Rap Rehab. I know you said that you mentioned radio rehab.
Oh, my apologies, sir.
No problem. Rap Rehab. And then the website, my website is Seb is Hip Hop. SEB is hiphop.com.
Great. Glad we got that in. Raprehab.com. Raprehab.com. And right. Seb is hip hop. Seb is hip hop. There we go. Got those in. Yep. We will plug that a few more times to compensate.
All right, no problem.
Anything that you think listeners should know about you, who you are, the work that you do before we get started?
I've been in the entertainment industry for many, many years. I kind of pulled back from the industry a few years ago, just tired of, the corruption and the politics behind the scenes. So I started an educational program which actually uses hip-hop culture as a medium to help students develop a sense of global awareness, to learn about the world, learn about current events, social issues, et cetera, and just, really using hip-hop culture as a platform to do so makes it a lot more interesting and appealing for the students who sometimes otherwise kind of check out of the process. So I've been, focusing my time on doing that as well. I'm a writer for Rap Rehab and a few other websites who pick up my work, and I'm also a creative consultant. So I still work part-time on the side as a freelancer, working with up-and-coming hip-hop artists. And, really the focus for me is conscious hip-hop. So, using hip-hop culture as a medium to spread a message, of consciousness, intelligent message, and really trying to get these upcoming artists to be more socially responsible with their music. So if I'm not in the classroom working with students, I'm still working as a teacher, if you will, even in the capacity of a creative consultant.
Okay. And for listeners who haven't seen any of the photographs or videos of you, you are a white man, is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Right on. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that the hip-hop industry and all other areas of people activity are dominated by the global system of racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Yeah. Well, the system definitely exists. That's undeniable.
Okay.
And I happen to be one who actually really looks at white supremacy. I mean, it's something that I look at every day. Plenty of people walk around clueless, not keyed into it at all, and don't see all the subtleties and the nuances of white supremacy and how they manifest themselves, in everyday, interactions with people. But I do. I look at it. So yeah. So it affects me every day on a very personal level, and as a parent, even more so.
Well, let's putting the mirror up at you, because that was kind of one of the main points that you were getting at in this particular article. What are some of the ways, like reflecting on your life, even times before you had all this information about how dominant a force white supremacy is? Can you reflect back on some of the things that you've done or said where you think, hey, this is one of the ways that I have practiced racism in my life?
I'll be honest with you. I've been on this journey, quote unquote, for many, many, many years. When I was around 9 years old, maybe even before that, I was already studying, ancient civilizations and studying chemistry, and I was already, part of a household where, where I was told, Jesus was not white, for example, So this is always something that was prevalent in my life, growing up, even as a little kid. The idea that that the world doesn't revolve around white people or whiteness. So I mean, it's kind of hard for me to really, really go back and think about those particular moments in my life when I was looking at the world through that lens, through those lenses, you know what I mean?
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Are you saying that you, as a white man, there's never been a moment where you think I was practicing racism?
Well, I'm sure it's happened in some way at some point, but I can't. There's no way I can tell you. Well, here's an instant in my life where I practice racism. I can't do that. I wouldn't even know how to pinpoint to one particular incident. Now, someone might say like, well, that's pretty delusional of you. How the hell can a white man completely absolve himself of having any white supremacist tendencies? And I can understand how someone would say that, yet I wouldn't be able to pinpoint any particular moment in my life where that happened. And if somebody can, if some deity or spiritual being was able to track down or write down every single moment of my life and open the book right in front of me and say, here are the particular moments, the specific moments where it happened, then okay. But at this point, there's nothing. Like if you're waiting for me to give you one particular moment, one specific example, I couldn't. I wouldn't even know.
That's something that I try to be mindful of is patterns, or when I get similar responses when I talk to white people about racism. There are hordes, seems every day, growing numbers of whites who allege that they are against racism, whether they say that they're anti-racist or they talk about whiteness or white privilege or whatever jargon they come up with. There are just hordes of white people who at some level will admit and spend a lot of time talking about racism, and they will talk about white privilege. I've noted that they are very comfortable talking about all of the goodies and benefits and knapsacks and credit cards and everything else that they get as a result of being white in a system of white supremacy. But I mean, lockjaw sets in when it starts to be, let's get to some of the ways that you practice racism, because in my opinion, that's really the nuts and bolts. The privilege aspect of it, I really don't find that to be very informative or even really very helpful in dealing with this problem, when we really can make some traction, is let's start spelling out some of the ways that you help keep all of this system in place that produces the Tamir Rices and Ayanna Stanley Jones and Kendria Johnson. Let's start talking about some of the things you do as a white person that produces all this, and then nobody has anything to say. And I've noticed that consistently, where people have given almost an exact response to what you just said. Maybe they don't include the deity part to come in and pick out something, but it's pretty similar in terms of what they say. And that's something that should be thought about, in my opinion.
Well, because it's pretty hard for people in general, and I can't speak for the rest of your guests because I don't know who they are. But, in general, those very, what we might call micro moments of microaggression or micro white supremacy, or, anything that happened in the past, that's hard to pinpoint. Like, if I could sit here and tell you, like, yes, 5 years ago, I remember doing this or behaving in this way or, or displaying this kind of, these particular characteristics, that would indicate that this is, part of a white supremacist ideology. If I could do that, I would, but I can't, so again, it's kind of, like what you're asking, and the reason why maybe you're getting the same answers is because in general, people just have a hard time thinking back to those little things that they have worked hard to divorce themselves from or separate themselves from. If you have a Klan member or a neo-Nazi on your on your show and you're interviewing them, well, they can tell you what they did 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago that falls under that ideology because they live that lifestyle. They're proud of that lifestyle. But if you're asking people who are quote unquote anti-racism or anti-white supremacy, they're working towards purging themselves of what they consider, what they define white supremacy. So, in many ways it becomes, something that's harder to define or harder to put your finger on. Again, I can't speak for the rest of your guests, but, logic would dictate that that's most likely why it's hard to go back to whatever that point may be.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem logical to me, but as I said, folks can think about that. Have you ever been accused by a non-white person of practicing racism?
No. Not to my face.
Okay. Do you think it's logical for black people, non-white people on the whole, to suspect that a white person could be a racist, even you, to have a pretty high level of suspicion?
Sure, of course.
Okay. One of our earlier white guests, Dr. Barbara Trepanier, she's down in Texas. She wrote the book Silent Racism. She was on our broadcast in 2011. The crux of her book, the most important thesis from her book, is that one of the main reasons that we have not solved the problem of white supremacy racism is the notion that there are some white people who are not racist. And she says in her book, she writes basically that if you are a white person, there's no way that you can not be racist. You would have to be participating, involved in all of this in some way, shape, or form. It would just be to a degree. I don't really get into Klan metaphors. I think that's a flawed way of representing racism, white supremacy. But if we were going to talk about it on a scale, you could have somebody who's a judge, and this is my job. I throw black people in prison, greater confinement. For 40 years, boom, 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 boom. I'm just tossing it out all day long. You could have that. You could have somebody who is telling racist jokes. You could have a white person who is around other white people on the job, and this white person is doing things so that this black person doesn't get a job or doesn't get a house or whatever the long laundry list of things that white people do. Her basic point: if you are white, you've got to be racist. And one of the reasons we haven't solved this problem is thinking, imagining, hoping that there are some white people who are not racist. Do you think, Dr. Trepanier, do you think her point is valid, accurate?
I'd have to be a little bit more familiar with her work to really tell you whether or not it's valid or not. I mean, based on what you said, all I can say is, it sounds interesting, but I'm not familiar with her work. You know what I mean? It's too much for me to say yes, it's valid or not without really knowing her material.
Do you think there are white people that are not racist?
I'm sure they are. I can't. It's impossible for anybody, for any rational human being, to say there are no white people that are racist. Like, how can I say that? How can I make such a general statement? I can tell you that white supremacy exists and we see it every day, but I can't speak for every single person. That would be foolish of me.
I didn't ask you to speak for every single person, just based on you are white. I'm assuming you have white family members, white friends. I think you're at least over 25 years old, so you spent a good chunk of time on the planet. You've been in contact with a number of white people.
Yeah, and there are a whole lot of racist white people.
Hang on. Based on your experience, the white people that are in your family that you come in contact with, are you seeing a good number of white people that are not racist? Do you think, just based on what I said, do you think there are some white people that are not racist? You can't even answer that question?
I think there are some white people who are not racist. Yes.
Okay.
There are some white people who are not racist.
Okay.
Are the majority of white people racist? I would have to say yes. Are some white people not racist? I'm sure.
Okay. Are you in that category? A white person that's not racist?
I definitely say I'm in that category, yes.
Okay. And the difference
I have no problem saying that I'm in that category. I mean, why would I? Why would I why would I tell you I'm racist? Why would I not put myself in that category?
What's the difference between you and the rest of the white people?
Is this a serious question?
Yes.
Because I'm me. I'm different than not just other white people, but other people in general.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about. I mean, this is. I'm not really. I'm not into all the laughing and stuff. I mean, this is serious. This is how we end up.
No, but
hang on. I want to just make sure that I'm very clear. I'm asking you. You said that you are a white person that's not racist. So what's the difference between you and all of the other white people that you are not so quick to put in that category? What's the difference?
Wait, what's the difference between me and a racist person? Is that what you're asking?
You said you are not racist. So what's the difference between you and all of the other white people that you would not put in the category with yourself as a non-racist white person?
I don't go around promoting a white supremacist agenda. That's not what drives me. That's not how I function, and I don't subscribe to any activities in my life that promote or perpetuate a white supremacist power structure. If anything, I fight against it.
You, in that same report, How White Privilege Makes Everyone Sick, you also write that white people are victims of white supremacy. Can you explain that?
Sure. White people who are white supremacists or subscribe to those ideologies or work towards furthering a white supremacist agenda or white supremacist structure, it makes them sick as well, because first of all, it's not healthy. And in the long run, everyone loses out, because just the idea of furthering something that means that somebody has to be at the bottom, just the idea that a structure exists in place where people enforce the concept of superiority and inferiority, that in itself can't create a healthy balance for anyone on this planet. So in the long run, everybody ends up sick. It doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit anybody's kids, anybody's grandkids. It doesn't benefit nature. It doesn't benefit the planet itself. So we all lose out, whether it's in this lifetime or eventually, white people lose out as well. White people lose out. White people lose out. They give a little of their humanity, even by doing that. Even from a spiritual standpoint, regardless of religion or whatever the case may be, even from a spiritual standpoint, that's given away a part of your humanity, just perpetuating this structure can't be healthy.
I've heard that sentiment not as frequently as I've heard when I ask white people, can you name some of the ways that you've practiced racism? I haven't heard what you just shared as frequently as your earlier response, but I've heard that one a lot as well. And I will have to at minimum say he is an admitted racist, but Mr. Timothy Wise, he was on the program and we asked him the same thing, and he said that he does not think white people are victims of racism and does not think that is an accurate way of describing this system. And my stance is one and the same, although I have slightly different logic as to why I state that. Number one, Charles Blow, black male, he writes for the New York Times. He has a great post today talking about racism. He had a spectacular post back in September. Dr. Welsing shared it with me. And he talked about how white people are disproportionately represented as victims of crimes consistently in the news, where you're constantly getting this notion that somehow white people are being mistreated or harmed, typically by non-white people, black people, is how this stereotype goes. And in my view, and particularly, we just had Ashlyn Sullivan on the program last week, the white girl in Kansas, where she was dating or in some sort of tragic arrangement with a black male, and she got all these nasty comments and what have you, writing about her quote unquote interracial relationship. And I guess she said it was a lot of other white people were calling her names and making death threats and all of this. They presented her too as a victim of racism. And I just, in my view, that is not accurate. White people are not the targets of racism, white supremacy. In your response, you just said that white people don't benefit. It's difficult for me to even accept that seriously when there's so much scholarship that talks about white privilege and all of the goodies, benefits that white people. Hang on. That white people derive, because you did say that white people don't benefit ultimately. And I've seen yes, you did. Yes, you did. People are listening. They can come to their own conclusion. I'm not finished with my response, though, sir. I'm not finished with my response. I'll allow you to get your time in, but I'm not done. I heard you say that white people ultimately do not benefit. And to me, that is absurd. It could be an act of racism or out and out deception, but I just do not think that is accurate. As I said, there are tons of scholarship. It contradicts with so much of what even many white people say about how much they do benefit from terrorizing and mistreating black people. So I don't think it is accurate. I don't think it's valid. And I think it reinforces a lot of very strong recurrent themes of white supremacy where they are the victims, even on down through history, where we have to talk about those two white boys that died with James Chaney in Mississippi in 1964, and Viola Louisa, she's about to come up because it's about to be the 50-year anniversary of her assassination. This is a very redundant theme. I don't think it's accurate, and I would seriously question anyone who presents whites as victims of white supremacy, that they could be deliberately practicing racism in giving that sort of response. Now, did you want to get your turn in?
Yeah, can you quote who has said this?
I mean, it's being recorded. It's in the archive. You saying you didn't say it? Fine, we heard that. You said you didn't say that.
No, but go ahead, quote it. You said I said it, so quote it. Obviously, you must have responded to something that triggered that. So what is it?
I just told you a paraphrase of what I said. Oh, excuse me, of what you said. This is being recorded.
I didn't say any of that, man.
Thank you. You said that, so just give your response. You already said that you didn't say that. Continue.
Listen, I said white supremacy makes white people sick. That's what I said. I didn't say that white people don't benefit from white privilege or that white people are victims of racism. I said they're victims of white supremacy, because the act of white supremacy or the perpetuation of promoting a white power structure is a structure where everybody loses out. Does that mean that they're absolved of being racist or absolved of benefiting from white privilege? Absolutely not.
Have you concluded whether or not white people are going to voluntarily stop practicing white supremacy racism?
Voluntarily, people, first of all, they need to be educated on what that means. The conversation that we're having right now isn't even a conversation that's part of the public discourse, or it's not a common conversation. The idea of white supremacy or white privilege isn't even really a popular point of discussion. It's still something that most people are not even familiar with. So before any white person voluntarily frees themselves of their racist tendencies, they need to be educated on the very basics of it. Even the definition of racism isn't really clear.
So just to make sure that I'm clear in your response, are you saying that you think most white people, they are not educated, they're not informed about white supremacy, and once they get that information, then we have a chance for them to voluntarily stop practicing white supremacy? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that it has to start with the education first. Now, what happens after that, I have no idea. I don't know. But it has to start with the education. Racism, just the very idea of racism. What does it mean? Is somebody racist simply because they have their own personal prejudice, or is somebody racist because they actually have the means and the power and the resources to hold somebody back or oppress people? People have to know what those words mean and how it applies to their own lives, to their own habits, to their own thinking. So it has to start with education first. Most people, the average person, thinks that white supremacy means Klan members or Nazis. Therefore, most white people can't possibly be white supremacists because most white people don't agree with Nazis or Klan members. But when you look at the broader definition of what white supremacy is, then it includes a much bigger group and a much bigger, a much broader ideology. But again, people have to be educated on what these things mean. So that's what it starts with: being informed on the definitions, and then on what this looks like, how white supremacy manifests itself every day, how racism manifests itself every day. These are things that people need to know about, and the average white person does not go around thinking about these things because it doesn't really, they don't see it as being as affecting their own lives. They don't think about it. They're oblivious to it. So, it has to start with education, with knowing, with being aware.
If anyone is ignorant about racism, it's black people.
I still didn't really get my question answered. The education piece, aside, I will just say for the record, in case we have first-time listeners, in my view, that is astronomically untrue. But I don't even have time to get to that right now. The voluntarily.
Hey, what was it? What was that thing that you just played? The little. I didn't hear what it was.
Is ignorant about racism, it's black people. But my question was about white people voluntarily stopping the practice of racism. Do you think once white people get this information about what white supremacy is on a deep level, and again, I'm saying I don't think that's accurate, but just for sake of argument, once they get this information so they have an accurate understanding of what white supremacy is, how it works, do you think then that white people are going to voluntarily stop practicing racism?
Probably not if it benefits them.
If they'll be back to benefits. If it benefits them, probably not. Okay. Did any of your white family members, did they have a problem with you marrying a black female, having children with a black female? Any family, friends have a problem, raise an issue about that?
No.
You said no?
I said no.
Okay. Is your wife, was she like born in the States or was she born outside, just for clarification?
Nope, she's born in the States.
Born in the States. And she's a black female? She's not, any of the other classifications, non-white classifications?
Yeah, she's my wife. She's a female.
African American? I'm just trying to make sure I'm clarifying. She's not, they have a lot of other classifications of non-white people, but she's quote unquote African American, born in the States, parents black, the whole nine.
Yes, she is.
Got it. Okay. Is your wife, because like you write some of the programs that you do, Take No Prisoners Radio, and the stuff that you do for raprehab.com, is your wife as vested in talking about racism, white supremacy as you are? Like, does she write or talk about these issues? Does she have the same interest as you do in all this?
Yeah, she does, but she's not a writer.
Okay. What does she do to address these issues?
She's a teacher.
Okay. She talks about this in her classroom work?
Yep, and she also does a lot of volunteer work in the community.
Okay.
She's part of different organizations.
I see. Okay. Did she at any point in you all's relationship, even before you got married, anything where at any point where racism came up, where she had some questions of you as a white man?
Sure. These things are going to come up in an interracial relationship. I mean, that's that's pretty, I guess that's pretty normal, that these things would come up. Talking about race, I mean, that's what we do when we talk about race. I write about race. Race has always been a topic of conversation between us.
At any point, you said where, these issues come up, is any point where she has challenged you as a white man? Can you share one of those times where she challenged you or raised an issue with you being a white man in the system of white supremacy?
No, we talk about white privilege. We talk about white privilege. Obviously, how I navigate this world and who I am as a white man is definitely going to have an impact on how I'm perceived or what access to certain things that I may have. I mean, white privilege exists. If somebody sees me, I'm a white man. People are gonna respond to me in the way that this, I guess, structure would tend to respond to a white man.
Right. I understand all that. I'm just saying, is there any point where your wife has specifically challenged you or raised some suspicions about you being?
Oh, you mean like an argument or something?
It could be an argument, or it could just be her raising a point and saying something that you're doing. This seems like something that a racist might do, or a racist might say. Is that?
Oh, okay, nah.
Okay. You referenced Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in your article. Have you heard Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? Or matter of fact, before I even get to that, what is your view of Dr. Welsing's theory on white supremacy?
Well, I agree with her view of white supremacy. That's it. I agree with it. Based on my reading and my viewing of her different lectures and different videos, I agree with it.
You agree with what specific? Because I'm sure some of our listeners do not know who Dr. Welsing is. So what specifically do you agree with?
I agree with the psychological aspect of how white supremacy has a hold on people.
The psychological. What, can you explain that? What does that mean specifically?
I mean, maybe you should break down to your listeners what she writes about or what she talks about. You said maybe some of your listeners are not familiar with her work, so maybe you should explain it.
I could, but you referenced her in your work, so I would prefer, since you referenced her, if you could share what your thoughts are. You referenced her, I assume that you have some knowledge.
Listen, I read the ISIS paper when I was young.
Okay.
And I agreed with everything in the book. I agreed with the idea that white supremacy, like I said, becomes this reprograms people's thinking, reprograms people's response and reaction to how they perceive themselves in the world, and how, again, white supremacy becomes the default. That's what I agree with. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of all her work. I couldn't do that right now. Do I agree with her work? Yes, I do agree with it. Do I agree with every aspect of everything that she's written? Well, I haven't read everything she's written, or I haven't seen every presentation she's made. But as far as what I've read, I agree with it. Now, if you're going to pull up something, quote something from something she's written that I'm not familiar with, then I can't speak on that. I can only speak on what I've read or what I've seen and what I've heard.
Have
That's
you
it.
heard
So
her talk? Have you heard her speak about white people having sexual intercourse with non-white people?
I've heard some of that, but probably not enough to really speak on
What?
on it.
I guess what portion did you hear her talking about on that subject?
I saw a video on it.
Okay. Do you remember what she was saying? Like, you compare, it doesn't have to be verbatim, but I mean, to the best.
No, I don't really remember. I mean, you're asking me to recollect, like, things that I've seen in passing or read in passing. I can't do that. Can you recollect everything that you ever seen or read?
I didn't ask you to recollect everything that you read or said, but if I wrote a public article where I referenced a particular person, I think it would be reasonable to ask me, you mentioned this person. What do you know about this person? What have you read? Or if it's videos or film or whatever the case may be, I think that's reasonable.
I told you, I said I read ISIS papers and I've seen videos and different presentations.
Okay, we got that. Dr. Welsing, she has talked several times, I've heard, where she's talked about sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people, where the gist of what she's saying is that these arrangements strengthen the system of white supremacy. They do not work against racism. That the white person, whether it's a white man or a white female, that they are taking advantage, really sexually exploiting a non-white person who is in a weak position because of the system of white supremacy. And it's really confounding what it means to be white. It confuses that non-white person further, and it confuses many of the other non-white people who are not directly in this relationship, but just observing, whether it's friends, family members, whatever the case may be, just seeing this confuses them about racism, confuses them about what it means to be white. What is your response to that?
I would have to. I'm sure that some people may fit in that category, and some people don't. Again, it's a very general thing to say, So I wouldn't say 100% of people who are part of those relationships absolutely fall in that category. I can't do that.
Don't recall anyone asking you to do that either.
Say it again?
I said I don't recall anyone asking you to do that. So I'm listening to your response on the sexual aspect, and just, this is something that we talk about on a pretty regular basis. Have you heard at any point, and you don't have to recall the exact author and every time, but just have you heard before people suggesting that one of the ways racism will end is by white people and non-white people having sexual intercourse and having children, and everybody will just be, have you heard that suggested before, that that's one of the ways that racism will be defeated? That
racism will be defeated by
non-white
people of different races,
white people and non-white people having sexual intercourse.
Yes, I have heard that before.
Okay. I've heard that a lot over the years, even before I started studying racism seriously, and afterwards. I hear it all the time from white people and non-white people, and seriously, where these people are not joking, like they're serious. They think this is one of the ways that racism could possibly be ended. I am of the opinion that nothing could be further from the truth, that this has been going on for a long time. Today is President's Day. Dr. Welsing, she has frequently said, fondling fathers, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. I am of the opinion if this was going to solve the problem, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. This problem would have been nixed centuries ago if that was really going to be an elixir for all of this. I am of the opinion that these tragic arrangements, when white people have sexual intercourse with a non-white person, it is a maximum act of racist aggression, and this is the logic behind that. I start out, number one, as you already stated, we're in agreement at least on this point, non-white people, victims of racism, it's logical for them to have a high level of suspicion of any and all white people until this system has been totally eradicated, replaced with justice. We were in agreement on that. I asked you about that earlier. My second point, under this system of white supremacy, white people collectively have more power than non-white people collectively. That is what the system of white supremacy means. Do you think that's an accurate statement, that white people collectively have more power?
Yep.
Okay. If that is in place, what we have is an unequal, an unbalanced power dynamic between white people and non-white people. And that's really what we're talking about, not white privilege, white power. White people, and they just passed a new rule. It was so timely up at Harvard. They just passed a new rule at the Ivy League creme de la creme, saying that faculty cannot be in any sort of sexual activity with the students. And I always reference that white people pretty much give this logic out all the time, whether they have specific rules in place or whether it's just something that's frowned on. If there is an unequal power dynamic, a boss and his employees, a teacher and a student, a warden and a prisoner, there's not supposed to be sexual intercourse there. You don't have equals. One person, it would be very easy for the person who has more power to take advantage of, exploit the person who has less power. And that is the dynamic, unfortunately, that we have worldwide under the system of white supremacy, where white people have more power. It is very, very easy for that white person to end up taking advantage of and exploiting that non-white person. Just the logic. You don't have to agree, but the logic of what I'm saying, does that make sense?
I'm listening right now. I'm processing everything you're saying.
Is it logical? You don't have to agree. I'm just saying, is it logical?
Let's keep talking right now.
I'll ask that question again. You're processing.
Okay,
Got it. I'll ask it again.
You can ask it again. You can ask it again.
Okay. The other aspect of this is that white people have frequently fooled non-white people. Really, racists have frequently fooled non-white people. And what I mean by that is that frequently racists are very deceptive. They don't always tell the truth. They frequently lie. And non-white people, unfortunately, have thought this is a good white person. This white person is not racist. This white person is, down for justice, and they're down with black people or non-white people or whatever the case. And then it turns out that actually was not the case, that this actually was a racist white person. There is a long track record of that sort of thing happening until this system has been totally, permanently vanquished. There should be no room for non-white people being fooled anymore. Let's get this problem solved. And then if folks want to hook up and do all that, then we can think about it. But certainly until that day comes, no, we're shutting the bedroom down. We're going to be serious about this. We have major problems between white people and non-white people. Those problems need to be fixed first. The logic, does that make sense? Logically, not saying that you agree with it, but logically, does it make sense?
Not completely. No, there's some holes in it. There's some holes in that logic.
What doesn't hold logically? What doesn't hold logically?
No, because it's bigger than that. There's all kinds of variables. There's all kinds of factors that aren't really considered when making that argument. As a whole, it sounds. It sounds valid. There's too many variables. You know what I mean? There's things that exist. There's feelings. There's ideas. There's concepts. There's natural forces that exist outside of that construct that would make that logic not foolproof.
Okay. Gunnar Myrdal's quote. I've referenced it before. Sex is the principle around which the whole structure of white supremacy is organized. You said that there are things outside of that, and there are things that are bigger than what I just said. In my view, nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing operates. Hang on, you're interrupting again. Nothing operates outside the system of white supremacy. That is what supreme means. Nothing. So I'm of the opinion that even when you talk about feelings, and all of that is contaminated with the virus of white supremacy. Even the times when people say the rhetoric, the cliche that I hear all the time, that, oh, we don't see color and we just fell in love. I didn't fall in love with a white person, or I didn't fall in love with a black person. I fell in love with this person because, blah, 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 whatever else they say. Yeah. The system of white supremacy contaminates all of that. There's no way, even as we were saying before, there's no way that you can exist within a total structure system of white supremacy and not have everything that exists within that be influenced, infected by that logic train of thought. So in my view, that just doesn't make sense, which I would expect. I mean, you have some stake in this, being a white man married to a non-white female.
Great. Sorry about that. My question is, I read in your article, you mentioned a whole bunch of black thinkers, Dr. Clark, Dr. Welsing, and all of them. Can you tell me what your top 3 favorite books are from these thinkers and why they're your favorite books?
Top 3, the autobiography of Malcolm X, Black Man in the Nile, and top 3. That's kind of hard. There's a book. It's not a huge book. It's not necessarily a very well-known book, but a book that impacted me is called The Electromagnetism of the Ankh.
Okay. And why are those your top 3 books?
Malcolm, I think, was the book that, me and millions of other people, Malcolm autobiography was pretty much the book that I feel kind of really, opened up my eyes and really kind of introduced me to white supremacy, as a structure or as a belief, as an ideology. Black Men of the Nile, because just the history and understanding the black man's history on the planet, and the electromagnetism of the Ankh, just because it breaks down the power of the Ankh from again, the electromagnetic, but it really gets into the physics, and the ingenuity of ancient Kemet, and how things that we see today, like the Ankh, has such a deep rooted history beyond just symbolism, and how powerful symbols are just beyond, the actual depiction and images of it. It goes much deeper than just a nice picture. It's it's deeply rooted almost in in a universal cosmic aspect. So
the person who dialed in, last 4 digits 1749. 1749. Did you have a question for Mr. Elkouby?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, Gus? How you doing tonight? How you doing to the guests?
Yeah, how you doing? I'm all right, thanks.
I had a few questions for you. Hopefully they don't amuse you. One question I have for you is exactly where are you from? If you don't mind me asking, where did you grow up at? Your teenage years, go to high school, things of that nature.
Yep, I'm from France originally.
France originally. So you went to high school in France, and
No. I went to high school in Southern California.
Oh, in Southern California. Okay. Did you hang out around a lot of black people?
Most of my friends were black growing up. Yes.
Oh,
in
okay.
the United States.
Okay. Because I only asked because you used a few words and you sound. I don't know if it's proper to say, but you sound somewhat black. You would confuse me if you called me on the phone. I'll probably think you were a black guy with some of the things you said. You mentioned the books you read. You made a statement that made me think that you listen to probably a lot of blog talk shows other than this one, or maybe you'll watch a lot of YouTube on some of these things.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't have too much free time to get on YouTube or listen to too much Blog Talk these days. But every once in a while.
Yeah, because I never heard a white person say Kimmy before. That kind of like threw me for a loop. I said, man, he had to get that from somewhere.
Well, I mean, I'm 43, so I've been around before the internet, before YouTube. So a lot of my upbringing was based on my own research, without the internet. I mean, I know a lot of people these days get a lot of information from the internet, but when I was coming up, it was definitely books and VHS tapes, lectures, like actually attending lectures and just meeting with people one-on-one, So by the time my I guess my mind or my thinking was formed, the internet really hadn't even, been around yet, or at least, accessible to most people.
Who do you think is most confused about racism, white people or non-white people?
Who I think is most confused about racism?
Yes.
White people.
White people are most confused?
About racism? Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Just for my own clarification to make sure, because I could be going crazy. So if I'm hearing things, it would be helpful for me. You all could let me know before Mr. Elkouby departs. The exchange we had where I contended and still do that he said that white people don't benefit from white supremacy. He said he did not say that, that I just, misheard him or what have you. The people that called in who, have a hand up, you got to ask a question. Did you hear him say that white people don't benefit from racism? This can be a yes, no, so that way I'll know if I'm... Well, hang on. I just want to see, what the folks heard. Did you all hear him? Yes, no, the people that have a hand up?
Yes.
Lots of yeses. Any no's? That would let me know if I'm going crazy. So if you didn't hear it, you can just make that known.
Well, Gus, let me ask you this: if I'm telling you right now that white people do benefit from white privilege, what does it matter if 1 million people have their hands up and say yes? I'm telling you right now that white people benefit from white privilege.
I'm just clarifying for what you said earlier. That's all. It's cool.
I know. I really don't think I said that. But let's just there's possibility that I said it. It was obviously a mistake, because if I did say it, I don't believe that to be true. After everything we've discussed today, after everything that I shared today, would it even make sense for me now to say that white people don't benefit from white privilege? I mean, it's not even consistent with the 2.5 hour conversation that we've had. If I accidentally, said that, it's not consistent with the whole conversation that I had. So what's the point of trying to prove that I said that when nothing that we've discussed in the past 2.5 hours even remotely sounds like I think white people don't have white privilege?
Right. I'm not gonna keep going around the barn with that. It's in the archive. People can check it out. You can visit the website. It's raprehab.com, where he writes quite a few articles. You can go check out quite a few of them dealing directly with racism, the raising pro-black biracial children. You can check that out. And then his radio program, Take No Prisoners Radio, which is also linked. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll kind of see his bio at the bottom. Thank you for hanging out with us this evening, Mr. Elkouby. It was.
Hold on, we still got a little bit of time, right?
Did you have something? Because we had other callers. If you wanted a question, if you wanted to get some more questions in.
No. I wanna ask you. So what? Because I know I'm on trial here. This is like a trial show. This is like a court. This is interesting. I'm being judged and observed and dissected and analyzed, et cetera, examined. It's really interesting. So let me ask you this: what's the verdict, Gus?
What's the verdict with regards to?
What's the verdict? I mean, in regards to your judgments or your assessments or your evaluations. I'm curious, like what's on your mind now after I hang up and you go and reflect on this entire show and what we've discussed and all the questions and what I said and what callers said. Like, what's the verdict in your mind? Where what does all of this mean? My presence on this show, what has it brought to the table? What has it how should I say? What has it taught anyone? How has it benefited anyone? What does it all mean at the end of the day? That's what I want to know.
May I answer for mine?
May I answer?
They would like to answer. Actually, no, because
that's the thing, right? The show is, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but the show is an opportunity to have constructive conversations and to learn and teach and share, et cetera, et cetera. Am I correct?
It is supposed to be about learning, having constructive exchange. That being said, I think you said earlier it's so difficult to make generalizations, and people will listen and get their own understanding about what they heard and what they learned, what you had to say,
Right.
what I had to say. So it's so difficult to make broad generalizations. There's always a gray area. I can only say for
No,
myself.
I agree.
I can only say for myself that things went about exactly as I thought they would. But at any rate,
so what does that mean? So what does that mean?
it means things went exactly as I thought they would under the system of
well,
white supremacy.
You gotta go into a little deeper than that. I've given you 2.5 hours of my thoughts as best as I could. So you can at least tell me what Give me 5 minutes of what that means. What did you think?
May I answer for my position?
No, and I'm doing this for a reason. We can just keep doing this for 5 minutes. The only answer that I have is it went exactly as I thought it would under the system of white supremacy. Exactly as I thought it would. You want to do that for 5 minutes?
No. But I mean, it's just interesting. You get 2.5 hours of my time, and I'm doing my best. I really am doing my best to answer these questions and your callers' questions to the best of my ability. Some of them obviously didn't. Some of your listeners didn't get the questions answered the way they wanted to because I really didn't have an answer. But I think I gave you a pretty good 2.5 hours, right?
It went exactly as I thought it would under the system of white supremacy. That being said, I do appreciate you hanging out with us for the 2.5 hours or so of your time. Hopefully, folks got some constructive info. And
you know what? Let's do this. The same question I asked you. Let's. Is it cool if we ask some of your listeners to say a little something and answer my question?
No, I've said that before already as well. No, that is not. I am cool with the exchange. You said you had an extra 20 minutes, so thank you for your time. I will, or I guess you will be departing now, and we'll get ready to wrap the program up. We do 3 hours. We have about 15 minutes left to give out details for what's going to be on the program tomorrow and all that good stuff before we wrap up. But I do appreciate your time and energy, and I will definitely be keeping an eye out for your future writings, what have you, your radio program. If you discuss any of the exchange this evening, I will keep an eye out. But definitely, thank you kindly for your time. And
Can I get some people to reach out on Twitter?
No. I would prefer not. And in fact, that's not even something I'm opening for an opportunity for a request. So thank you kindly. I appreciate your time.
Why not? What if I want to continue the conversation off air.
I'm sure folks are intelligent enough listening to this program. They can figure out your Twitter. I already gave out the website where all your
Right.
material is available. So I'm sure they are intelligent enough. They can track down your info the same way I did. And they can do all that if they are so inclined. That being said, thank you kindly. We will be letting you go now. Thank you, Mr. Elkouby. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right.
Greetings. Context of White Supremacy. Mr. Elkouby is still with us, which is fascinating for a myriad of reasons. I will explain. I have muted him though, because I will explain why I did not answer his question, and that is a part of my counter-racist code, which is why I did not allow any of the listeners to get into that sort of exchange as well. As I've said consistently, it should be about asking questions. Mr. Elkouby and I, we have a massive fundamental disagreement about who needs information about racism. I have concluded that white people are not ignorant. He talked about when the question was asked, what do white people talk about when there are no black people around? He said it's a lot of racist commentary, racial slurs, and just nasty comments about black people that he says. And he said on the job, this wasn't when white people are intoxicated, presumably, and just sitting around watching football and what have you and cheering for the Patriots. He said this happens on the job, at PTA meetings and what have you, different settings where this happens. In my opinion, that is not the product of white ignorance. That is the product of white people being dedicated to the practice of racism, white supremacy. They don't need any additional information. I've concluded it is not in our best interest to sit around and give these white folks a lot of details and information. Well, tell me what you think about. No, I was even thinking while the program was happening that I was thankful. People just asked questions. People were not on talking and having exchange and blah, 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 blah. And let me tell you this and let me tell you that. Is, in my opinion, it is beneficial. It is constructive. When you talk to white people, this is not about you trying to impress them and show how much you know and what you, it's not about that at all. You want to be asking questions of them. I've concluded individuals like Mr. Elkouby, they are very good at studying their victims. Everything you tell them, this is somebody who has said he's read the ISIS papers. He's read all these other folks about Dr. Ben, John Henrik Clark, and Ida B. Wells. He's familiar. This is someone who can't say that he's ignorant. He hangs around a lot of black people. I would suggest, I suspect this person does his homework in studying black people. He's married to a black female. He has non-white children. He studies racism. He studies black people. He studies victims of white supremacy. So no, I'm not going to give you any additional information for you to further refine the way that you practice and how you go out and talk to non-white people. I don't think that's in our best interest, and that's why I did not want any of the listeners to answer his question. Like, yeah, let me tell you, no, not at all. Particularly given some of the responses that we got from him, you can't even answer, what does it mean to be white after you've already identified as a white person, and you can't even answer that? No, I am not an open book for you, and I encourage other victims of racism, don't fall into that trap when you're talking with whites. They are very good at that. Even if you paid attention to in the program, there were many, many times where questions were asked, and he would switch it around and ask, well, what do you think? Don't fall for that at all. Just make sure you get your question answered. If it's not answered, you can file that away as well, but really make an effort to not fall into that trap of feeling as though, you know, I want to talk a lot and share my view and inform this white person and set them that should not be happening at all. I don't think that works against the system of racism. This guy I think would be very dangerous. I was thinking of J. Love Calderon, suspected racist. She was on the program I think 2013. She's in the kind of same vein. She's written books about racism and comes from the whole hip hop angle. She interviewed Talib Kweli in her book. She interviewed M1 from Dead Prez and quite a few other black people that are in hip hop, some of them not. I think they would be a deadly, lethal duo going out to talk to black people. I think they have studied black people. They spend a lot of time around black people. Most black people, I do not think would be suspicious of them at all. And I recall from that program, some of the listeners who had seen her live, J. Love Calderon, had even said that they think if the way that we spoke with Mr. Elkouby tonight that other non-white people, other victims that are a bit more confused, they would be there to defend these whites. Like, oh man, there's no way you're going to talk to, Seb like that. There's no way. This is a great white guy. He's married to a black female. There's no way you're going to talk to him that way. I think that same dynamic would play out if we had done this, live in person around other confused victims. I'll end by just saying I think his intelligence about white supremacy showed, I think, in some of the questions that he did not answer. The racial classification, what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be black? I think a lot of the questions where he, in my view, deliberately didn't want to answer. Even what is your understanding of Dr. Welsing's work, where he really didn't want to give up too much detail about that? I think that was deliberate, not wanting to show how much he knows about racism, white supremacy, and even, in my view, his ongoing commitment to white supremacy. I could be in error. I thought also that part about him saying that white people don't benefit. That's huge aspect of racism, white supremacy, because he did say it. Then he said he didn't say it. And to get into why is that such a big deal? Obviously, white people did say all that. That's just massive, in my view, deliberate and willful, conscious act of white supremacy, just to confuse, I think, the typical victim who does not have a real solid foundation for white supremacy. It would have totally confused and crossed them up, which I think is by design. A lot of these white folks like him who allege that they're against racism. That's the purpose of all this, to have you confused and just not have clarity, logical clarity about what racism is, how it works.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
And we'll build soon. Peace.
Peace out, brother.